afternoon, everyone. My name is Jody Brockington, and I'm the host for today's National Urban League Job Network Digital Career Success Series. And today's topic is, does your resume resonate? And to increase your interview chances by over 200 times over. That seems like we're offering a lot, but it does work. Have you often thought about your resume? Does it go to a black hole in an HR department? Do you never hear back? Not even an automated computer response sometimes when you send a resume in electronically? Or are you simply just not getting the results you want from your resume? And even some of you have thought that they're even useless. Today, our special guest, Dan Sullivan, who is the Senior VP of Sales at the National Urban League and partner with the Professional Diversity Network, with nearly 15 years of experience in the online job industry, firsthand knows exactly what candidates like you and anyone who's trying to make a career change, how important it is to navigate the job-seeking process to a most effective result. Today, he's going to provide some understanding of how the online application process really works behind the scenes and provide a powerful new tool to empower you in the job-seeking process. So let's welcome Dan Sullivan, our host for today. Dan, take it away.
Good afternoon, everybody. And Jody, thank you so much for that introduction. I really appreciate it. And I'm very excited to spend some time with everybody today. Before we get started, I think what probably makes the most sense is to define a couple of goals that I think that are important here. And they're modest goals, but I think they're incredibly powerful goals. So as we dig into learning a little bit more about how the HR and recruitment process works at many companies across the country and how you can get a leg up in that process, I think it makes sense to maybe define a couple of goals that we're going to work on today. So in the next 30, 45 minutes, I really want to be able to identify and achieve two specific goals that I believe that are important to you and will give you some empowerment in the job-seeking process. First is to provide some knowledge and understanding of how the online job-seeking process works behind the scenes. I think you all know how to go out, look for jobs, find jobs, and apply to jobs. But what happens on the back end? What happens behind the curtain that you never have an opportunity to see? Knowledge is power, and I think if you really understand how those systems work and how you can best position yourselves and leverage those systems to your advantage as opposed to your detriment, will put you in a much better position as a job seeker in this current economy. The second goal I have is to provide you directly with a unique tool that will be free for you to use. It's going to really level the playing field for you in the job-seeking experience when you go into applying for jobs, as you've been doing with many of these companies' career sites, to actually give you a tool and a resource which enables you to modify and adjust your resume to assure that when it goes through that system, that you're at the top of the pile and not at the bottom of the pile, and your resume really does have the skills and the background that would really require or should push you to the top of the list. More often than not, we find that there are simple little things that you are unaware of or don't have any understanding for that adversely impact you when you're applying to jobs and find you getting screened out for jobs that you're uniquely qualified for. Not only is this frustrating for you as a job seeker, it's equally frustrating for recruiters that are desperate to find good, qualified candidates for their open positions, but because of these systems gobbling up your resume and not getting it to them, adversely impacts them as well, and that they're not getting the types of candidates that they need to fill the positions in a timely fashion. So, spend a little bit of time here and walk through some things. If you have questions and questions come up through this process, I want you to jot them down. There's a chat box here. You're more than certainly able, and I would encourage you to enter any questions that you may have. We will get to questions at the end, and if any come up, please let us know as we go along. So I'm going to ask you a couple of quick questions as we go through. Right? I sort of refer to this as the perfect job. So how many times have you found the perfect job online? You read the job, you look at the job, you read it a couple of times, and you get this sort of nervous, excited anticipation. You say to yourself, it's almost as if this job was written for me. This has got everything that I do. This is the job that I'm looking for. I have a lifetime of experience that's been built up that makes me uniquely qualified for this job. I'm pretty confident that almost all of you have had that experience, and probably some of you have had it fairly recently. So what do you do in that situation? Well, you obviously get excited, get your resume out, and you apply to the job. and you know that you're going to get the interview. This is the job. This is the one that I'm positioned for, right? Your mother calls up and says, hey, how'd you like to go out for dinner tonight? You say, you know, I can't. I just applied for the perfect job. I have to sit by the phone because the recruiter's going to be calling me any second now. You put your plans on hold because you know that you just applied for the job that was just written for you. And the reality is that you end up hearing nothing. Phone never rings. You never get an email reply. And you just sit there saying to yourself, what the heck happened? This doesn't make any sense. Did anybody look at this? Does anybody understand just how well qualified I am for that job? So in reality, what ended up happening is you fell into the ATS black hole. So a question you may be asking yourself at this point is, well, what is the ATS black hole? So to give you a little bit of perspective, ATS is an acronym, and it stands for Applicant Tracking System. If any of you have applied to a job on a company's career site, where you had to log in, you had to attach your resume, you had to answer a few questions, you've been in the ATS black hole. So companies use these technology systems, and really, in essence, what they're designed to do is to sift through all of the resumes in a quick electronic fashion to identify the best candidates for open positions. So the one big dirty secret that I like to talk about quite a bit here, and I think is really important for you, is that these systems are incredibly flawed. And more often than not, these systems make more bad decisions than good ones. And when unemployment is incredibly high and job applications are plentiful, companies can afford a few bad decisions because their time and energy that they have to dedicate to looking to resumes is relatively limited. The number of people that are coming through, and they're trying to spend time and identify the perfect and most exact candidate for open positions. So there's a number of things that can actually contribute to you as being a potentially perfect candidate for a job, getting screened out of the process by this applicant tracking system. So why don't we talk about a couple of those reasons and sort of why they exist. So one of the things that's important to note is that the applicant tracking system looks at your resume and does a very quick electronic scan based on the job that you're applying for in ways and looks at all of the relevant experience that you have exclusively and only in relation to the job that you're applying for. So what ends up happening more often than not is many job seekers actually have too much description and too much content in the resume that describes and talks about roles that they had prior or that they used to work up to making themselves ready for this particular position. And when you actually look at the experience in relation to the job that you're applying for, it's not as relevant as you might think, and it actually adversely impacts you. And when I say adversely, it actually counts against you and actually impacts you in such a way that it may lead to you being screened out. One of the other things that's often sometimes will happen is a limited mention of skills that are crucial to the particular job. More often than not, you will find that there are skills that you may have, like being proficient in Microsoft Office. You may just think that that's sort of a normal component that anyone would have in their life, and it's not worth mentioning on a resume, but a job description may actually ask for proficiency in Microsoft Office. And even though you have those skills, you may not have mentioned them enough, or you may not have highlighted them enough so that the system can automatically interpret that you've been using PowerPoint for the last 10 years, and it's a second nature skill to you, and you wouldn't even think enough of it to list it on your resume. The other thing that often can happen is that the ATS may misinterpret certain skills or traits that are outlined on your resume. And I'm going to show you some examples of this when we do a live demonstration, right? There may be circumstances where in a sales capacity, I may talk about my experience in securing new accounts, and the job description in the vernacular or the language that the company uses is more about prospecting for new business. And if I talk about securing new business and the job ad is looking for prospecting for new business, then I don't get screened in because it doesn't actually look at that experience, which is dead on to what the company's wanting, is being relevant to what they would want. So that's another reason that you can often run into. The other thing that often can happen is poor formatting on the resume. Look, the bottom line is you may be incredibly skilled as a marketing professional, as an executive assistant, as a sales professional, as an IT professional, and maybe your skill set is not being the chief resume officer, and that's not what you're applying for. But unfortunately, the system and the way the applicant tracking system will assess your resume, it's actually looking for a level of proficiency in resume writing, frankly, that you don't necessarily have to be the perfect candidate for that job. So that's great, right? I can provide you some context, I can give you some understanding, and I can explain to you how these systems on the back end work, but then it leaves you saying, well, that's great, now I know about it, but what the heck can I do? How do I get a leg up in this process? How can I navigate through the ATS maze? How can I actually turn these circumstances around for me or navigate my way through them so that I have an advantage when I'm looking for a job? So that leads me to one of the tools that we're going to talk about today, and we're going to show you how to leverage and utilize. It's a product called RÈSUNATE. And in essence, it is the secret to beating an applicant tracking system. So what RÈSUNATE enables you to do, and we're going to show you a live demonstration of how it works, is it enables you to have your resume assessed against the job that you want to apply for, just like an applicant tracking system would. And it will give you a score, and we'll also give you tools and resources and show you how to make modifications and adjustments to that resume on the fly so that your resume is speaking the language of the company that's hiring and the job description that you're applying for, and make certain that your resume is appropriately aligned to that particular job so that you get screened out and you get that call from the recruiter. All right? So, one of the things I think that's really important here is that you want to make certain that you have an understanding as to what employers are looking for insofar as a score, how you should be aligned, and making certain that the system, the applicant tracking system, that the infrastructure that the employer is using is seeing you as the perfect candidate as you are. And that we're going to go through that process, and we're going to take a look at it, how you can make those adjustments and how you can consistently move the scoring of your resume up so it truly reflects who you are and speaks the language of the hiring company. So think of it this way, right? Rès-UNATE sort of works as your personal interpreter. And one of the frustrating points that I've seen in my nearly 15 years in the space is that you understand what you are doing, you understand your applicability for that job and how well suited you are for that job. The recruiter understands that, and unfortunately we put a system in between the two of you that actually serves as an interpreter that doesn't understand the language that any of you are speaking. And in essence, Rès-UNATE really work as your personal interpreter, which enables you to make certain that your skills and your traits are aligned appropriately so that you can get through the ATS phase. This is a resource that is designed to get you the interview. When you find the perfect job, this is the tool that will help you get that interview. So Rès-UNATE will assign a score, very similar to the score systems that the employers will work, and then we can edit, we can add, we can remove content in real time, and we can see how the score gets updated. And then when we find that our resume truly reflects who we are and how we're suited for that job, and also gives you a score that would be reasonable and much higher than you would want it to be, then what you do is you put yourself in the best position to be screened in and get that job from the recruiter. Okay? So, as we move forward, I'm going to go into a live demonstration and give you a little bit of a true, I can talk about this all day long, but I think you'll get more understanding and more sense of how this tool works by being able to see how it works. One of the things that's important to know is that Rès-UNATE is a resource that is built into and embedded into the Urban League Jobs Network. This is a resource that's free for you, and for every single job that you would find on the Urban League Jobs Network, you have the ability to utilize and leverage this tool free of charge to give you the leg up in the job seeking experience. So I want to walk through a couple of the things for you that will be important in gaining the appropriate tools and putting yourself in the best position to not only use the Urban League Jobs Network appropriately, but also to use Rès-UNATE in the most effective manner possible for you. So quick look here on my screen, you'll be able to see the Urban League Jobs Network. You'll be able to see all of the content and information that's there. One of the things that's really important here is in the middle, you will see that it's going to ask you to create a profile. And to be able to leverage and utilize Rès-UNATE to its fullest capacity, one of the things, the first thing that you're going to want to do is to create your profile in the Urban League Job Network. Now, you have to create a profile in these applicant tracking systems all the time. It asks you to sign up for a username and password. You do that 20 times for each one of these. One of the nice things about this is you can build a profile here and you can take advantage of all of the resources that we have. Your resume will be stored in your profile. When you want to apply to jobs, it will leverage that appropriately, and you don't have to go through multiple logins. So I encourage you, if you don't already, to go in and create a profile. Make certain that your resume is uploaded into your profile so that no matter where you go, no matter where you're positioned, you will always have access to your resume by simply accessing your account within the Urban League Jobs Network. So I'm going to log in real quickly here so that I can show you exactly how this works. And you'll see I am now in my profile. My resume is uploaded in my National Urban Leagues profile. It's here. I can make adjustments in my profile if I want to. If I secured a new job or if something happened or I wanted to add something to that, I can always go through and make those adjustments. But then the other thing that I can do is I can execute a job search from this interface. So I'm going to go through and actually take a look for sales jobs that are in the Cincinnati, Ohio market. I picked Cincinnati because the National Urban League will be doing their annual conference there this summer, and I thought that it would be worthwhile for anyone that was in that market to have a little bit of a sense for it. So I'm going to go in and search for jobs currently for sales in Cincinnati, Ohio. So you'll see that I get a return of jobs that are listed in the Cincinnati general market, whether it's Cincinnati or Kentucky. And I take a look at some of these jobs that are out there, and I look at some of the ones, and I take a look at what might be relevant to me and my background as someone that's been in the advertising sales space for quite a bit of time. And I see this one particular job that seems to be interesting. The title seems to speak to me. It's talking about key accounts and advertising sales, which is really everything that I've been doing in my last 15 plus years in the space. So I want to take a look at this ad, and I want to learn a little bit more about this job. So this is a job for Gannett. Gannett I happen to know just by being in space. This is the company that publishes, amongst other things, USA Today and a number of other things. And when I take a look at it, I can read the ad and I can take a look at it. So it's talking about selling digital marketing solutions. It's talking about the requirements and what I need. It's talking about aggressive face-to-face sales, prospecting, all these things that I do in my day-to-day experience as a sales executive and have for quite a bit of time. And when I go through and take a look at what I need, which are really the skill sets that are required, it's asking for 3 years of digital sales experience. I very quickly look at that. I can see that, developing marketing campaigns, delivering sales presentations. These are all the things. And as I go through this and I'm taking a look at it, this looks like the perfect job for me. I mean, this is a job that's absolutely aligned with my skill set and my background and does everything that I've done. This time seems pretty unique and pretty interesting, right? High level of computer literacy with fluency in Microsoft Office. I mean, I use PowerPoint every day. I just used it to do this presentation. Microsoft Word, Excel, all of those things. I do all of those things. Salesforce.com, I use that every day. It's like second language to me. So as I go through this, I make a determination that I want to apply for this job because this seems like the kind of job that I want to go for. I've known about Gannett for a long period of time. I know that they're a good quality employer. I would love to work there. So as I go down and I take a look at the bottom of the screen, you're going to see that there are a couple of options that the National Urban League Jobs Network gives me. One is I can just simply apply to the job like I would anywhere else in any other infrastructure. But then there's a second button down below, and it says Optimize Resume and Apply, powered by Resume. This is the tool. This is the resource. This is, once you get some practice and you have your profile built, this is going to be your bridge. This is your connection to turning the job seeking and the online application process from a point of frustration to a point of joy. This is where you are going to get a leg up in the process and you are going to start to get interviews. I can assure you of that if you just take advantage of this tool. So I'm going to just click this button and the system automatically will take me over to Resume. And what will end up happening is that my profile, my resume that was built into the National Urban League Jobs platform was assessed. It took my resume and it took that job and it looked at it like an applicant tracking system would. Did you see how quickly that happened, by the way? It was less than a second. And when you apply to a job on a company's applicant tracking system, the amount of assessment that the computer gives your resume against the job you're applying for takes less than a second. It makes a determination in less than a second whether you go into the good pile or if you go into the bad pile. And it doesn't look at you as a human being. It doesn't look at you as an individual who's accumulated this skill and this background. It looks at you as 200 to 500 words on a piece of paper or an electronic document. It doesn't look at you for who you are. It doesn't look at everything that you've done in the past. It just simply makes that assessment and says, is this a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Now, you will see on this assessment, what happened with me, here is my resume and all my background and what I've done in the past. It's assigned me a score, which I can see up here of 7.7. So Some systems will use a 1 through 100 score, some will use a 1 through 10 score. Really, the only difference is the decimal point. So I've seen applicant tracking systems where I would rate it as a 77. I've seen applicant tracking systems where I'd rate it as a 7.7. 77 or 7.7 is pretty good, but if the recruiter that's recruiting for this job set the screened in or screened out level at 85%, as perfect as I may and as suited as I am for this job, I may have just gotten screened out in less than 1 second. And I can tell you, I could do this job with my eyes closed, and I could kill this job. I would do extraordinarily well. This was the job that was written for me. So I would never know. Without RÈSUNATE, I would go, I would apply to that job, I would sit by the phone, and I would wonder why I never get called. And that's because my resume went into this gigantic ETS black hole, and there's not a human being at Gannett that would ever see my resume. I'm done. I'm toast on this job. So the issue is, how do I use RÈSUNATE now to make the appropriate adjustments so that I can get my resume up to the point where it clearly reflects the skill set and background I have and how suitably I am aligned to this job. So as I go through and I take a look at my resume, and I know my resume, I've written it, I've worked with a resume coach, I've done all this work to make certain I have the perfect resume, I know what it is. So what's important is go back and take a look at the job that you just applied for. Take a look at some of the language and take a look at some of the skills, and let's make certain that we're doing everything that we possibly can to make certain that we're speaking the language that the employer is using and the system is interpreting, right? So as I go through and I take a look at this, I'll see some things that are in here, right? They talk about direct marketing, social media, website design, online display, mobile and other digital solutions, all of which in my last 2 jobs I've done work with, although I don't think my resume actually specifically speaks to them. So it might be a good idea for me to go through and make certain that I talk about some of those things. Ability to conduct a needs assessment, identify marketing and advertising solutions for clients, develop proposals and experience in delivering sales presentations. All of these things that I do, I don't think my resume says it exactly in that language, right? I talk about my ability to grow ad sales revenue and exceed goals. I talk about that. I think that that's fairly well in there. I don't make any mention of Microsoft Office. It's interesting that this has about 10 or 12 bullet points of important things, and it talks about being fluent in Microsoft Office is important. When I think of the skills that I bring to the table, I think that being proficient in Microsoft Office just comes with the territory. I never thought of actually outlining it on my resume. I may actually be getting marked down because I don't mention it. So now, and then down here, some of the things that would be a plus, right? Previous experience with Salesforce. Well, I use Salesforce every day. At my last 2 jobs, Salesforce.com is the system that we used. Interestingly, now that I think about it, I don't think my resume makes any mention of Salesforce. So now what I need to do is I need to go back and take a look at where my resume is. And 7.7 is not terrible. I did okay, but I didn't do well enough to get screened in. I was just good enough, but not good enough to get screened in. So now what I need to be able to do is take a look at where my resume is. And as you'll see all these little boxes over the side that are shaded in different colors, when I click it, you're going to see that each aspect of my resume was assessed against this job description, and RÈSUNATE in a color-coding manner showed how well that particular segment of my background was helping me in this process. And the darker the color, the higher and more applicable it is. And you'll see that, in some of these jobs that I've had most recently, I'm really closer to down the scale a little bit, closer to where 77 might be. And the idea is, what can I add to this, or what can I do to adjust this so that I can increase where I'm at? So, we talked about some of the things that they wanted. They wanted display, they wanted social, right? And I talk about how my responsibilities included securing new customers and maintaining existing relationships. But the interesting thing about it is that they didn't talk about securing new customers. They talked about prospecting for new customers. So maybe my resume should speak the same way they would, prospecting for new customers and maintaining existing relationships with the company's unique ad serving platform, a system that leverages social media, display, and SEO and SEM, which are 2 acronyms that I didn't necessarily mention, but they were mentioned in the job. And I want to make certain that if that's what you're looking for and that's what I've done, that my resume actually reflects that. So I can just go down here and click the button to save that. And what ends up happening is my resume gets adjusted, and it actually rescores my resume. So by making those simple little changes and alterations, you'll see that I actually score all the way up to a 10. That little adjustment, being able to actually speak the language of the job description, automatically increases the value. I didn't even have to go in and talk about Salesforce. I mean, the key is once you get to a 10, stop. You're going to get screened in. You're going to get the interview. At 7.7, I wasn't going to get the interview. So it may be a smart idea for me, especially if someone ultimately, when you get screened in, a recruiter is going to look at your resume. It's probably not a bad idea to go in and add some additional things like other experience. I'm just going to put in salesforce.com. To make sure that it's in there so when the recruiter sees that. So now that I've done this and I've made the adjustment, I know where my resume now sits, I can actually go through the process of saving this job and applying to the job. All right? So one of the things that you want to do is you want to save the resume. So you can take this resume that you've adjusted, you can name it whatever you want. In this particular case, I've named it the Gannett resume. I can save it to my computer, or I can save it into a PDF, or I can email it to myself. And then what you end up doing is you take that resume and you apply to the job. So here it is. Took that resume that we just adjusted, made some of the alterations, social media, display, and SEO and SEM, critical words that I've been doing for the last 5 years of my experience that I failed to mention on my resume. Because I was thinking of my resume not in relation to a particular job, but in relation to what I've done. And for me to list all of the things that I've done over the last 5 years, my resume would be 8 pages long. But the key is I want to make certain that those skills that I do have are accurately reflected in the resume that I put together. Now you can go through the process and apply to that job, and ultimately you're going to get the call back. Okay, so that is sort of the overview of how this works and how the system works. A couple of things that I think that are important that I want to sort of explain to you before we get into it and take some Q&A, because I know that there will be some questions. A couple of things that are important to know. One is, you may say to yourself, well, you know, I've spent a lot of time on this resume, and I'm really proud of the skill set of where I've gotten. I'm really proud of this resume that I've accomplished, and it shows what I've done over the last 15 or 20 years, and it really defines me as a person. I would hate to lose all of that. But I completely agree with you that resume is a reflection of who you are. And when you're being looked at by a human being, it speaks to who you are as a human being. The problem is, you're being analyzed initially by a piece of technology that has no capacity to look at you as a human being. So my recommendation is always keep that resume. That resume that you've gone out, you've spent money on, that printed on nice stationery, and you have available, and you mail out, etc. Keep that resume. Don't get rid of that resume. When you get the interview, by using resume, take that resume with you. Because at that particular point in time, you're going to sit across the desk from a recruiter who's going to look at you for the totality of your experience and the human being that you are. I hate to say it, I've actually seen resume used in such a way and looked at individuals' backgrounds and experiences in the ATS process and seen things like volunteering at a homeless shelter and denoting that on their resume under other skills and attributes actually count against them in the way in which they were scored by an ATS, and that their score for that particular job went up by eliminating that. So if we want to talk about how heartless the system is and how unable it is to look at you as a human being, you need to understand that there are circumstances when you put on your resume that you actually volunteered serving Thanksgiving dinner at a homeless shelter that actually gets scored against you by an ATS. However, when you're going to sit across from that recruiter and they want to look at you for everything that you have and the contribution you can make to that organization, you want to make certain that that's on there. Okay? The other thing that I will say is, this is free for use. Any job that's on the National or the Urban League Jobs Network, you can use this. That button is there on every single job. You can use it free of charge. The other thing that you can do, and I strongly encourage you to do that, is to practice. There may not be jobs in your market right now that are exactly like the one that you would want to apply for on this platform, but you may find one that's in a market that's different than where you live currently. But if that job were available where you live right now, you'd want to apply to that job. Go in and use resume. Practice. Go in and actually take a look at your resume and have it assess you against that particular job. The ATS won't score you down because you're in Texas and the job is in California, but you'll have an opportunity to practice. The more proficient you get at this and the quicker and more efficient you get at this,
the better you're going to be able to apply to multiple jobs and utilize this resource. It's like anything else that you'll use. The more that you use it, the better you'll get at it, the more intuitive it becomes to you, and the more proficient you'll become in utilizing it as a tool. So that sort of concludes the presentation and the demonstration portion of this. If there are any questions that have come in, and Jody, I certainly would refer to you if any have come in there that we'd like to have discussed. If there are any questions that have come up to this point, I would be more than happy to answer them and help you in any way that I could.
Great. Dan, I think this is a fabulous way to really illustrate and show how great this RÈSUNATE tool is and can be. The first question that someone actually would like you to go over a little bit, kind of, because you mentioned it twice, is kind of things that you would have on your resume online versus live. So you were mentioning about volunteer efforts, et cetera. Is there a kind of some no-nos, like what really shouldn't go on that might be hurting them? And then some things for sure to, you know, once they have.
Sure. I think, yep. Yeah, so I think, you know, the resume has traditionally been viewed as a document that defines who you are and your experience, your skills, and your background from the point at which you went to school all the way through the most recent amount of experience that you had. And the resume has always been looked at that way. And frankly speaking, prior to the advent of the internet, that was the only way in which you were assessed. There was no technology that took a look at that, and that was the way that resumes worked. The issue is that when the internet sort of took hold and online and technology really took over in the late 90s and companies started to utilize these technology systems, nobody explained or communicated that the process had gone from one of a human experience to one of a technology-based inhuman experience. So in essence, what I say is keep that resume. That resume is important. That resume explains who you are. If you go to a career fair, if you go to an interview, if you're networking, that resume explains who you are as a human being that you are. And it is designed to be analyzed by a human being. And ultimately, when we get the interview, the process changes. You go from being analyzed by technology to being analyzed by a human being. It's a valuable document. Don't lose it. Don't discount it. Don't get rid of it. As a matter of fact, use it as the foundation of your resume that you would use in the RÈSUNATE tool. RÈSUNATE is specifically designed to apply to that job to get you the interview. Don't think of the resume that you built for that job. If you apply to the job and you get screened and you get an interview, bring a copy of your larger, more worldview of who you are person. The bottom line is you need to customize your resume to every job that you apply for to make certain that you're getting screened in the system. So, you know, I can speak to it. Yes. You know, the example that I just used, and I may have used that example after the questions had already come in, but I was working with a customer, a job seeker that was looking for a job. They're looking for a graphic design job, and they had a tremendous amount of nonprofit volunteer work that they had done in their background, a lot of it. And they were applying to be a graphic designer at a technology startup in Silicon Valley. And ironically, when we showed that it was scoring us very lowly on the application because it had absolutely no relevance to the job, but it certainly spoke to who this individual was as a human being. When we eliminated those types of things from the resume, within RÈSUNATE to apply, their score went up and went up dramatically. So when you have too much content on your resume that's not directly related to that job, the system in its heartless way just scores you down on it. It doesn't, I mean, and if I need any example to show you just how heartless the system could be, the fact that you get scored down because you serve Thanksgiving dinner to homeless veterans on Thanksgiving really should speak to just how heartless the system this actually is. However, when you sit across from that recruiter at that company, that's going to be an enormously valuable thing for them to see how you fit within their organization from a cultural perspective and really enables them to see you for the human being that you are. So you have to split this into two different processes. You have to split this into going through the heartless online application process versus the interview process. So two different processes, and they require two different documents. Does that help, you think, Jody? Does that answer the question?
That's excellent. I'm now going to combine a couple of questions that are similar yet different. So this really relates to the idea of the length of one's resume. Is there a difference? Because we spoke to about, 250, 500 words, and then, kind of is an online resume length kind of different than, when you're actually handing it to someone as well? And is there really this cutoff, like when you're told this many words on an essay, if you don't
sure.
what happens?
Yep. Yeah. So very similarly, it brings us to the fork in the road where there's the inhuman technology-based process, and then there's the sort of human-based process. I will tell you that the rule of thumb, the general rule of thumb is if your resume is more than 2 pages long, even in a analyzed by a human being process, most resumes don't get read beyond 2 pages. And you should be able to succinctly be able to talk to your skills, your attributes, who you are, the path that you've been on in 2 pages or less. And if it goes much longer than that, that becomes problematic. I will tell you that the rule of thumb is, and resume will really help be your guide there, an application that you will want to stay within that same 2-page area. However, if you have 8 pages, if you have 12 pages, or if you have half a page, it's really about the percentage of the content on that resume that's relevant to that actual job. All right? So the fact is when you're going through the application process, the idea is that you want to make certain that as much of that content is relevant to that job. And that if you speak about being a part-time sales associate at a Gap at the mall to put yourself through college, but you're applying for an engineering job, you would be actually better off to eliminate that background because it's not relevant. It doesn't help you. It can only hurt you. Some of the ATSs will say, how many words are on this resume? How many of those words are directly relevant to this job? And it will actually score you and say, you know what, more than 50% of the words on this resume are not relevant to the job. And you could be Steve Jobs applying for a job at Apple. And if 50% of his resume was not relevant to his skills and backgrounds for that particular job he was applying at Apple, the technology in its heartless way would actually screen him out. So I think it's important to note that's a good rule of thumb. In the application process, it's not about how many words or how long it is. It's about what percentage of it, how much of it is relevant to that job. That help?
Right. Yeah, no, very much so. The other thing that you mentioned specifically about resume was kind of the scoring. Do you have to have a 10 before you apply for a job? Like,
no.
Range,
No, you definitely don't have to have a 10, and I think that that's important to note, right? So that's the one bit of guesswork that we get in this. And I will tell you that there are some jobs, it really comes down to a supply and demand type of a situation. I will tell you that if you're in the type of industry, if you're in the type of a place where it's a very high in-demand kind of role, like an engineer or something of that nature, more often than not, recruiters recognize and understand that the system sometimes can be flawed, and they're not going to set the scoring too high because anybody that actually has an engineering background, they want to look at that resume. So they may set the score much lower. They may also understand that engineers aren't particularly good at writing resumes, because frankly they're not. However, it could be an administrative or an executive assistant position where the flow and the volume of applications that you're going to get there, they may set the bar extraordinarily high at 85 or 90% because they only want people to have everything that they're looking for. And as they say, the scoring, more often than not, is directly tied to the differentiation in language, right? So I typed on my resume, securing new customers. The Gannett refers to it as prospecting for new customers, and there's a lot of companies out there that do call it prospecting. So just making that change or that alteration goes a long way towards actually helping me out because I'm actually tying the language of my resume to the cultural language of the company that's hiring. And that's what's going to help me.
No, that's excellent.
But I will tell you this, don't work to get 10s, don't kill yourself to get 10s. The one thing I can tell you, and I think this is important to note sometimes, is, and I can understand when you're in the job seeking process, you can sometimes get a little bit aggressive with thinking that every job that you read would be relevant to you. And the good thing about this is the tool that should actually help you in being able to truly assess how perfect you actually are for that job. If you struggle, and if you make every alteration and change, and you still can't get the score on your resume above 65 or 70, then you have to take a giant step back and read the job description again and really assess whether or not your energy and your resources are best on this job, because you may have given a quick read of that job description and realized it was perfect for you, but then on second assessment, you may find that there are some significant gaps or there are some significant things that job needs that frankly your skill set and background don't have. Use it in that realm.
Yeah, the other important questions come up specifically for Resonate itself in terms of its availability. Is it only available with us? What other websites or places, can other search boards are starting to use it? People would like to know. And then, what are the costs? How long is it out there for, et cetera? So all of the logistical, how long is it for the Urban League? Is it just for us?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to answer that, and that's a common question that we get to the point where I should probably just cover it in the presentation. So RÈSUNATE currently is built into the Urban League Jobs Network. Any job that you find on the Urban League Network will have the RÈSUNATE functionality available to you and free of use. If you find a job directly at a company that you want to apply for, or a job elsewhere where RÈSUNATE is not built into the system, but you would like to use RÈSUNATE for that purpose, you can go to the website, RèSUNATE.com, which is RESUNATE.com, and you can actually sign up for a free trial account, which would give you the opportunity to use RèSUNATE for 3 jobs that you would like to apply for, using RèSUNATE for free. Now, if you want to use it more than 3 times, there's a whole schedule of services, and there are a fee for that. But my strong suggestion is continue to use the Urban League Jobs Network. And when you do find those jobs, I will tell you that if you apply for a job and use RèSUNATE to get an interview, and that job is not on the Urban League Jobs Network, the one thing that I would ask for you, in lieu of us giving you a free trial and usage of that system, is when you do get that interview and you do talk to that recruiter, tell them about the great jobs platform at the Urban League, and that company should really get their jobs out on that system because it's a great resource to use.
No, thank you for answering that. I know at one point we had different, time slots and how long it would be free, but at least for us on our jobs network, which is why we are really truly promoting that today, for you guys to really upload your resume here at www.NUL for National Urban League jobsnetwork.com. And, use the tool with us, find some jobs with us, and if you, still can use them elsewhere, once you've corrected them, they're great. The other questions are more, Dan, that are coming into are more on logistical issues with resumes. Those who are job seekers who are trying to do a career shift, maybe what they are doing now is currently no longer going to be a job anymore or as much, or they just want to make a change. So you want to go from cooking to being an investment banker. How do you show your transferable skills or use RèSUNATE for that?
Great question, and one that we field fairly frequently. And I think, and this is a little bit more challenging. I'm going to be perfectly transparent with you. If you were a chef for 20 years and now you want to be a key account manager, that is a transition. And when they're looking for a skill set or a background, being able to translate those skills are important. So one of the things that I will say is that just about any job that you've worked in a professional environment, depending on the job that you're going for, and if you have requisite skills, like if you wake up one day and you decide that you want to be an astronaut and you don't know how to fly a balsa wood plane, I would strongly suggest that that's probably too aggressive a leap for you, and even RèSUNATE's not going to position you to be accepted into the NASA astronaut program. Like, there's just a little bit of reality that helps there. However, if you've been in a particular technology field that's starting to be phased out or offshore and you want to move to something else, I clearly get and understand that. There's a couple of different things there. The key is to take a look at the job description and take a look at everything and understand where the skills and the background and the experiences that you've had in your past tie you or connect you to that. So if you were in the engineering department and you now want to apply for a marketing job somewhere, in engineering, right, any company that engineers and builds something, they turn around and they ultimately communicate with the marketing department what that product is and how it does and how customers can interpret it, and then the sales team go out and sell that. So more often than not, you've had some experience in working with marketing or positioning with marketing or giving marketing the tools and the resources that they needed to turn around and position or market the tools that you helped them build. And, the interesting thing about it in that particular case is there's a lot of good tangible skills in marketing of having a functional understanding and knowledge of the product. And the key is to talk about things that you did to assist or aid the company in relation to the marketing effort. So the idea is whatever contribution that you've made, think about the tie to that particular job that you had in your experience and your background. The other thing that I will tell you is that more often than not, and I know that this is a difficult one for people sometimes, but you have to get your head around it sometimes, is that maybe and often, I think RèSUNATE will help you here, is take a look at a job that might be more entry level to the area that you want to go into. I can tell you if you grasp the job, if you get the skill set, you do well, you're going to be able to move up and you're going to be able to get to that level that's more in line with what you think that you should have from either an experience or an education perspective. But if you don't have the skills, you don't have the traits, the idea is to find those entry-level positions, position the existing experience you have to land that job and use it as a means by which to grow and expand through the organization.
You helped definitely with a complete leaper, from one industry to another. But often what people have been asking about today are those that, have a lot of great skills that are very similar, but in their current job, there's certain things often that we don't want to be hired for ever again, right? Like, so I was 20 years ago, I was an organizer, I don't ever want to do that again. But so that's what you're looking for. So how do you, when do you decide what to take out, what to leave? In other words, I always want people to, get rid of the things you don't want to be recognized for. But sometimes some people, depending on their skill level and where they are in their career, then they almost have nothing.
And this is where the concept of practice works, right? So the beautiful thing about it now is that job may not be available on the National Urban League site in the market that you are right now, but you may find a job that's similar in Plano, Texas, or Miami, Florida, or Boston, Massachusetts. And the point is, and I think, Jody, this is where I would encourage everyone that's trying to do that, is do your homework. Do some practice. Go in and use RÈSUNATE. Take the resume that you have now, go in, upload it against the job, use RÈSUNATE to take a look at how you would score. Then go through and make some adjustments. Go through and think about, take a look at the job and make some alterations and some changes and see how it impacts your score. Now, every role and every background and every set of experience is going to be different, and there are millions and millions and millions of stories, but the way in which the system would actually look at your skill set and the way that you position that will change. The beautiful thing about it is with a tool like RÈSUNATE, you actually get to see how that happens, as opposed to, hoping and praying that, all right, I made a change to my resume, I'm going to apply to this job, let's see if I get screened in or if I get screened out. The issue is go and use RÈSUNATE as a tool, it's a resource to learn how to best position. When I position this skill and that skill at my past job, I actually score better for a marketing position. So now how do I expand on that, right? So the key is to play around with the tool a little bit. It's like anything else. You have to dedicate a little bit of time to it. You have to practice. The more you practice, the more proficient you'll get. The key is you want to be able to learn and interpret the things that are helping you in that process and taking a look at the way in which your score is adjusting. Eventually, you're going to get the knack of how to best position the skills and the traits and the backgrounds that you have for the type of position you're trying to move to, and how that shift between careers can be best positioned, and how you can leverage all those traits and skills that you've acquired in the best way possible for that application process. Practice. That's the best way to do it.
Great. So what I love most about the Digital Career Success Series is the wide variety of folks that we attract to the call. So we have everyone here from leaving college to the very seasoned executives. And a lot of them have different questions that I think you can answer, more about the logistics of what to put on or not to put on your resume. So can dates kind of age you if you're putting on how long you've worked a place? Are objectives still necessary or unnecessary? And in an ATS system and in some of these online systems, when you're just new to the workforce, how can you score better and make sure that you're not, hitting that HR black hole or hitting any of these, I'll call them pain points for HR department, and or that's something that can hurt you,
Yep. Yeah, so there's a couple of things I think that work there, right? Is that when you look back at and you think about the things that you did in college and the things and the contributions you made, the key is, and this is about tying your skills to what the company is looking for. There are volunteer things that you may have done on campus. There are clubs you may have participated. There's all of those things. The key is using RÈSUNATE to match that experience and those skills to what the company is asking for and how it ties, right? So if you secure a marketing degree, a 4-year degree, and you went to school and you did everything possible, and you did an internship and you did some things, it's highly it's not a reasonable expectation that when you apply to a job that you're going to have 5 years experience, because you don't. RÈSUNATE doesn't make things up that don't exist, right? You don't need RÈSUNATE to make up a resume that puts you in a position with skills that you haven't acquired and you haven't done, right? That's a whole other topic for another day, but certainly, the one thing you want to do is it's about positioning the skills and the attributes that you have, right? So you may have worked in a part-time job. You may have done some things through college to generate some money to buy books and to pay for your tuition, and there may be some skills and some attributes that you picked up in that role. And the key of what RÈSUNATE does is it enables you to tie those skills to the job description and see how it affects and impacts your score. The other thing is, the one good thing. I mean, there's a lot of bad about the way in which the ATS works. The one good thing about the way that the ATS does is if it doesn't see you as a human being, it doesn't see you as someone who has 30 or 40 years experience. Ageism and too much experience and overqualified and all of those things are generally effects that happen in the employment landscape and the human-to-human experience. So, the issue is how do you use RÈSUNATE to get through that process? I can tell you, all the applicant tracking system cares about is what apportionment of your skills, your background, is attributable to this job and how does it position you to do this job today. The good news about that is that the ATS doesn't know how to be ageist, doesn't know how to be racist, it doesn't know how to be any of those things. It's the one positive aspect of a purely blind technology-driven system. So from that perspective, I wouldn't worry about it. Where those challenges and those issues tend to come into effect, frankly speaking, is when you get into the interview process. And unfortunately, we haven't invented the technology solution that enables us to get ourselves around those issues. But I know the Urban League and many of the other organizations in the country are really working through a series of education to do that. The other thing that's really helpful there is it doesn't look at a gap of experience. It doesn't look that you haven't worked for the last 6 months and define you as unemployed and screen you out. It's one of the other advantages to the technology system. So there are some advantages to the technology system, but obviously the disadvantages are those skills and traits that you have and how they don't connect to the job.
You brought up a touchy subject, but something that also definitely came up on our questions today in terms of unemployment. When, if you have been unemployed, even if it's for a little while, there is a little gap, are you better off on your resume? This was a specific question, leaving it saying still present versus they're showing, this I just got let go last week or 3 months ago. Do I leave it as present, like I would still have it on LinkedIn, or do I leave it resume? Is the question that was asked.
Yeah, and this is a difficult one, and I know it's an issue that many Americans face today. And I will tell you, just sort of looking around and doing some research and being in the space, a few years back when unemployment was at unprecedented highs, there were companies that were out there that were specifically screening individuals out or essentially eliminating them as potential candidates if they had an unemployment gap that was 6 months or greater. I can tell you that has been deemed to be illegal. It's something that you can't do, and it is something that many companies have sort of grown to understand. Let's be candid, let's be frank. Unemployment has been pervasive in the United States since 2008. It's something that I think you're much better off being perfectly straightforward with. I would just address it, talk about it, and deal with it the best way possible. The key is, and I will tell you, the good news there is that the marketplace is changing. I think that we're finding in the latter half of 2014, hiring is going to be increasing. I think nothing cures that issue more than demand, and I think demand is starting to increase. And, the other thing is that I think that you need to do there is you need to accentuate the positives in your background and your skill. I will tell you that more and more companies are putting a greater and more significant premium on the diversification of their workforce and making certain that they have representation in their organizations that give them the full spectrum of view of American society as a whole. That diversity of thought, that diversity of anything that you have in your background is a tremendous asset. Make certain that it's leveraged. That's not seen by the ATS, but it is definitely seen by the human being when you get there, and it's a massive asset for you. So the key is that you want to offset any of those things that may be impacting you negatively with some of those things that would be positively impacting you. And I will tell you that being able to, and I speak to a lot of vice presidents and a lot of chief human resources offices in talent acquisition, and I can tell you there's just a really significant effort to go out and identify those individuals with the diversity of thought, diversity of ethnicity, the diversity of a whole host of different approaches and spectrums in the United States, and I would say accentuate that. It will offset the unemployment issue.
No, I'm definitely one for honesty, and all things happen for a reason. But we all know that sometimes it's sometimes a challenge to get over the hoop from either side, or you're hiring or you are the person who's been unemployed, to not being so desperate and not to, use it against you in any shape or form. So
it's a big societal issue, and I'm hoping for the day that that's no longer an issue, and I think we're moving closer to that. But there's no quick fix on that one, Jody.
And there's really no right or wrong either in terms of, I myself have gone in and out of work and also have my own consulting firm, so I never really have a gap. But that can also work against me because someone who's hiring for an regular employment position might not want me because of all my consulting, and that would come up first on my resume. So there's always going to be, for everyone who's had questions today, there's always going to be this double-edged sword. What RÈSUNATE is really going to help you with is help you fill out some of those gaps and holes that could lead you to where we call you don't hear back from, or you don't know where your resume has gone, and really help you focus on the positives and what that company that you want to be at is really looking for. And often, it's difficult when you do this stuff alone. For yourself, what's great about this tool versus my having to go get my resume done is that it does give you a good sounding board as if you are speaking with someone. And it helps you kind of think about things that you wouldn't think of on your own when you're just fixing, quote unquote, or just writing the resume.
There were two impediments in the marketplace, right? One is technological, and I think RÈSUNATE is really designed to help you navigate and leverage the technology to your advantage as opposed to your detriment. The other aspect of a series of issues that sort of create barriers or impediments in the marketplace are more social in nature. And this is where, National Urban League and other organizations are really working aggressively, and I think are really truly moving the needle with the impact of how those societal issues are impacting various populations in the United States, and I think they're doing great work there. That's a much harder, longer challenge. Navigating the technology, we think we've gotten, but I think being able to sort of connect the technology components that RÈSUNATE does with some of the societal approaches that organizations like National Urban League are taking and are really advocating on behalf of its membership will hopefully follow in suit. But I will tell you, nothing cures this in these issues more than a strong, healthy, vibrant economy. And though I'm not an economist, and I don't pretend to be one on television, I will tell you that all of the leading indicators and everything that I've seen, and I've been working in this talent acquisition space through 3 downturns in the economy, and certainly the most significant one was the banking crisis of 2008, which we still suffer from. But I can tell you I am starting to feel the thawing of that, and I am feeling that we are getting much closer to a more robust and vibrant economy, which frankly I think is going to put everyone in a much better position to overcome a lot of those societal issues that unfortunately limited opportunities create.
Well, I just want to thank you, Dan, for joining us today, and everyone who's on the line. I want to remind you that we will be back here next week for the next topic of She Makes More, featuring my good FOJ friend, Dawn. She will be talking about how in careers, often women are making a lot more money than our male counterparts, and how that may or may affect your personal and professional life as you move forward, but how to make the most of it, enjoy it, and really kind of continue to succeed and move up the ladder. So Dan, thank you so much, and thank you everyone else. Please remember to upload your resume to www.nuljobsnetwork.com. Look forward to seeing you and hearing from you all next week. Bye-bye.